Why is one of Hollywood's most promising new stars suddenly at the center of a bitter legal storm involving Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and director Justin Baldoni? The situation isn't just about a routine subpoena, it's unraveling into a high-stakes battle over influence, loyalty, and power in Hollywood. On the surface, this is about court filings and contracts, but beneath it all lies a much bigger question: who really controls the narrative when millions of dollars, reputations, and careers are on the line? Isabela Ferrer thought she was stepping into stardom with a breakout role, but instead, she's become the unexpected pawn in a Hollywood showdown. Isabella Ferrer wasn't a household name until recently, but she's quickly become one of the most talked about young actresses in Hollywood, not just for her talent, but for the chaos that's suddenly swirling around her. After landing her role, Isabella seemed to have the kind of fairy tale launch that many young actors only dream of. Blake Lively personally embraced her, inviting her into her glamorous circle, flying her out to movie premieres, styling her for events, and even introducing her to industry insiders. For a rising actress, that kind of access can feel like being handed a golden ticket to Hollywood. But while her career trajectory looked like it was set to skyrocket, her name has now become linked not to breakout success, but to legal battles, subpoenas, and a drama that threatens to overshadow everything else. The drama ignited when Isabella Ferrer was subpoenaed as part of the ongoing It Ends With Us legal saga. For those unfamiliar, a subpoena is essentially a legal demand to provide testimony or documents, something fairly standard in high-profile lawsuits. In this case, Wayfarer Studios, which Justin Baldoni is closely tied to, wanted Isabella's documents and communications. On paper, this was routine, even predictable. After all, Isabella worked on the film and was listed as a potential witness. But what should have been standard legal procedure quickly turned into something far more explosive. Instead of treating it as a simple matter of compliance, Isabella's response transformed the subpoena into a full-blown public spectacle, shifting the spotlight from the movie to a bitter war of words. What shocked observers was Isabella's legal team filing a sprawling 26-page motion that read less like a legal document and more like a personal attack. The motion didn't just object to the subpoena, it painted Justin Baldoni as manipulative, threatening, and even predatory. Her lawyers repeated the phrase quid pro quo so many times that it practically became the centerpiece of the filing, accusing Baldoni of leveraging legal obligations to control her actions. What struck many legal experts as unusual was how much of the language felt lifted from Blake Lively's own filings, sharp, hostile, and designed to dominate headlines. It raised an uncomfortable question: was Isabella really standing alone here, or was someone else pulling the strings behind her fiery opposition? The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore Blake Lively's influence in this story. From the moment Isabella joined the cast, Blake seemed to take her under her wing in ways that went far beyond co-stars. She showered Isabella with attention, flew her to events, gave her access to her elite network of friends, and even reportedly claimed that Taylor Swift was involved in her casting, a story Taylor herself denied. This kind of mentorship might look generous on the surface, but it also created a bond of loyalty that may have blurred the lines between friendship and influence. When Isabella's filing began echoing the same kind of rhetoric used by Blake, many began to wonder if the young actress was truly fighting her own battle or if she had been persuaded to carry the torch in Blake's ongoing feud with Baldoni. What made the situation even stranger was the clear double standard in Isabella's response. When Blake Lively subpoenaed Isabella, she complied without calling it harassment or intimidation. But when Baldoni asked for nearly identical information, suddenly it was framed as an abusive campaign of control. Why would the same legal request be treated as reasonable when it came from Blake, but sinister when it came from Baldoni? This inconsistency is what has fueled speculation that Isabella's stance isn't entirely her own. To many, it looks less like she's drawing a legal line in the sand and more like she's siding with one Hollywood power player against another. And in doing so, she may have unknowingly placed herself in the crossfire of a much bigger battle. At the heart of this mess lies something called indemnification, a standard clause in contracts that basically means your employer will cover your legal costs if you get dragged into a dispute connected to your work. Wayfarer Studios offered Isabella indemnification, which would have meant they'd pay her legal fees and manage the subpoena process. But Isabella rejected this and insisted on using her own lawyer, which immediately set off conflict. Her attorneys claimed Baldoni was trying to control her by managing her response, but legal experts say this is how indemnification works in nearly every industry. The disagreement spiraled into accusations of manipulation and intimidation, transforming a routine contractual clause into a public battlefield. For those watching from the outside, it felt less like a legal necessity and more like an engineered controversy designed to cast Baldoni in the worst possible light. If you read Isabella's filing, one phrase jumps off the page over and over again: quid pro quo. It's repeated so frequently that it almost feels like a script. The problem? Most of the scenarios described don't meet the legal definition of quid pro quo at all. Legal analysts have pointed out that what Isabella's team described were basic negotiations, not bribery or coercion. So why use the phrase? Because it's dramatic, it grabs attention, and it frames the story in a way that guarantees media coverage. In a legal sense, it may not hold water, but in a public relations war, it's powerful. The repetition alone suggests that the filing was written as much for the press as for the judge. And in that regard, it worked. Headlines quickly branded Baldoni as manipulative, even if the actual evidence told a different story. Once the filing hit the press, the narrative was set in motion. Outlets like US Weekly picked it up, painting Isabella as a victim caught in a campaign of harassment. Overnight, she went from an up-and-coming actress to the center of a tabloid storm. But here's the catch: the documents themselves don't fully support the claims being made. The emails and filings show lawyers going back and forth over indemnification and subpoena logistics, not evidence of intimidation or abuse. Still, the press rarely dwells on the fine print. Instead, they ran with the dramatic framing, and the public perception shifted. Baldoni was the villain, Isabella the victim, and Blake the protective mentor. It was a narrative tailor-made for Hollywood gossip, even if the reality was much murkier. To understand why this feels bigger than Isabella, you have to zoom out and look at Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. They've been accused before of using their influence to control narratives and protect their circle. There were even rumors of Ryan allegedly leveraging relationships with law enforcement to silence critics. In this context, Isabella's sudden aggressive legal stance feels like part of a broader pattern. Blake has a history of using her power to shape outcomes, and with Isabella under her wing, it's easy to imagine this filing being less about one actress and more about continuing Blake's larger feud with Baldoni. Whether Isabella realizes it or not, her name may be the newest weapon in a long-running Hollywood rivalry. The entertainment industry is built on loyalty, and powerful stars know how to secure it. Newcomers are often love-bombed with attention, gifts, and opportunities, creating a sense of indebtedness. For Isabella, Blake's mentorship likely felt like a dream come true. But when you're thrust into that kind of orbit, it becomes harder to separate personal loyalty from professional decisions. Legal experts have noted how closely Isabella's filings mirror Blake's language, almost as if the words were coming from the same source. This raises a tough question. Is Isabella truly fighting her own battle, or has she been nudged into becoming a soldier in someone else's war? For a young actress, that line can be nearly impossible to see until it's too late. Interestingly, while the filings have generated endless drama in the press, the judge overseeing the case hasn't been nearly as impressed. Time and time again, he has refused to issue sanctions, showing little patience for overblown arguments. Legal analysts predict Isabella's request for sanctions against Baldoni is unlikely to succeed, given the lack of clear evidence. This means her motion may not just fall flat, it could also backfire, drawing even more scrutiny to her role in the feud. If that happens, Isabella may find herself stuck between two Hollywood powerhouses, with no easy way out and her reputation hanging in the balance. At the core of this mess, it's not just about subpoenas, filings, or indemnification. It's about control. The film it ends with us has become more than just a movie. It's a battlefield where reputations and influence collide. Baldoni is fighting to protect his name. Blake and Ryan are maneuvering to protect their own interests, and caught in the middle is Isabela Ferrer, a young actress who wanted her big break, but instead stumbled into a war far larger than she ever imagined. Her name is now tied to accusations, speculation, and public controversy, whether she wanted it or not. And as the legal battles continue, the biggest question remains: will she be remembered as a rising star who got pulled into a feud she didn't deserve, or as a willing participant in one of Hollywood's most ruthless loyalty games? Isabella Ferrer's story is no longer just about her career. It's about how quickly Hollywood can turn a rising talent into a pawn in battles far beyond their control. What began as a simple subpoena spiraled into accusations, media storms, and the shadow of Blake and Ryan's influence looming large. Now, Isabella stands at a crossroads. Will she break free of the narrative that's been built around her, or will she remain entangled in a Hollywood feud that could define her career more than any role ever could? One thing is clear: the spotlight she dreamed of has arrived, but not in the way she expected. And as always in Hollywood, the real question is, who's writing the script behind the scenes?